Mia raced toward the lake, her heart pounding as the cold air cut through her. The sky was overcast, casting a dim light over the frozen surface. In the distance, a dog struggled beneath the ice. "Help, someone, please," Rick's voice echoed. Mia screamed back. "It's trapped under the ice." The team gathered around, panic rising. Mia's breath came in short gasps. "We can't let it die out there," she said, determined. The ice groaned beneath their feet, and time was running out. The rescue mission had begun, but danger loomed with every step. Mia's hands trembled as she grabbed the rope, preparing to help pull the sled. She could feel her heartbeat racing. Every decision felt like a risk, every move dangerous. Rick had suggested using the sled to help distribute their weight across the ice, but Mia wasn't sure it would be enough. The ice had already cracked under Rick's weight, and there was no guarantee that it would hold them. Still, there was no time to lose. "We're going to make this work," Mia said, though her voice wavered with doubt. She looked at her team. "We need to stay calm. We need to think." The others nodded in agreement, though their expressions mirrored her concern. The weight of the task ahead loomed over them. They could hear the faint sound of the dog's struggle beneath the ice, each cry driving them further into action. "Everyone stay close," Rick instructed, his voice firm. "If the ice breaks, we're all going down." The tension was palpable. As they readied themselves, Mia felt a lump form in her throat. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was a fight against time. Against nature itself. The sled moved slowly over the ice, its runners cutting through the snow as the group proceeded cautiously. Mia's focus was unwavering, but doubt crept into her mind with every step. They were crossing the lake, but the ice beneath them groaned, a constant reminder of how precarious their position was. "Just a little further," Rick muttered, leading the way. Every movement was calculated, every decision was crucial. The dog was so close, its faint outline barely visible beneath the surface. Mia could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. "Hold steady," she whispered to herself, just as much to calm her nerves as to steady her team. The crack in the ice was growing larger, more threatening, and the thought of failure filled her with dread. "We can't turn back now," Mia said aloud, though her voice was quiet, almost to herself. "Not when we're this close." They were too deep into this to stop, and yet, every second felt like a gamble with fate. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed across the lake. The ice trembled beneath their feet, and before anyone could react, Rick slipped. The sound of the ice breaking was deafening, and Rick fell through with a scream. Panic erupted as Mia and the others rushed forward, trying to grab hold of him. The freezing water swallowed Rick up, and Mia's heart stopped. She reached out, her fingers just missing his arm as he plunged deeper into the icy abyss. "No, Rick!" Mia cried out, her voice full of terror. The others scrambled, pulling Rick out of the freezing water, his body shaking violently from the cold. But he was alive, barely. "I'm okay," Rick whispered, his teeth chattering. Mia knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she checked for injuries. "We can't stop now," Mia said firmly, though her voice trembled. Rick looked at her, nodding. The task had become personal now. They had to save the dog, no matter what it took. Rick, now safely pulled out of the water, stood shivering but resolute. His ordeal had only fueled their determination. Mia glanced at the team, her gaze firm. "We're not stopping until we've saved that dog." They continued their march across the ice, the sled still in tow. Mia's heart raced with every step, but her resolve had never been stronger. The dog was close. She could see it now, its eyes wide with fear beneath the thick, cracked ice. "Hang in there," Mia whispered under her breath. "We're coming." The volunteers pushed forward, one step at a time, the urgency mounting with each moment. The ice groaned beneath their feet, but they had no choice but to press on. The crack was widening, but they were too close. They had to save the dog, no matter the cost. Mia's heart pounded as she watched the dog struggle beneath the ice, its movements slow and weak. She could see it more clearly now, its eyes wide with terror, its paws desperately pushing against the thick surface, trying to break free. She glanced at her team, their faces filled with determination but also fear. The crack in the ice was widening, and the situation was growing more dangerous with every passing moment. "We need to move faster," Mia said, her voice sharp and commanding. Rick, still shivering from his close call, nodded but didn't speak. The tension was palpable. Mia couldn't bear the thought of losing the dog now, not after everything they had already been through. They had come so close, and failure wasn't an option. "We can't waste any more time," she added, her breath forming clouds in the bitter cold. Her hands were frozen, her body exhausted, but her resolve was unwavering. They had to act before it was too late. The sled was ready, and they would need all the strength they had left to pull it to the spot where the dog was trapped. With a determined nod, the team moved forward, the ice creaking under their weight, their every step crucial. The volunteers began to move again, their breaths visible in the freezing air. Mia's mind raced as she focused on the task ahead. The sled glided carefully across the ice, its runners cutting through the snow as they navigated toward the spot where the dog was trapped. Each step was a risk, but they had no choice. The crack in the ice loomed larger as they approached, the sound of the ice creaking beneath their weight sending chills through their spines. "Stay steady," Rick warned, his voice hoarse but steady. "One wrong move, and we're all in danger." Mia nodded, her heart racing. The dog's struggles beneath the ice seemed to grow more frantic with each passing second. Andy. She could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her, but she couldn't stop now. They were so close. She could already imagine the relief she would feel once the dog was safe. But first, they had to get there. They had to cross this perilous stretch of ice and reach the trapped animal before it was too late. Mia's heart skipped a beat when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of cracking ice. It echoed across the lake, louder than before, sending a jolt of panic through her. She stopped dead in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. The ice beneath their feet was shifting, and it was happening faster than she had anticipated. "We have to hurry," Mia shouted, her voice breaking through the tension. "Ah!" The group quickened their pace, but the ice groaned again, louder this time. Mia's mind raced as she scanned the area. The dog was just a few feet away now, and she could see its eyes wide with fear as it clawed at the ice, helpless to escape. "It's so close," Mia muttered, almost to herself. She didn't know if they could make it in time. Her heart ached as she thought of the animal trapped beneath, struggling for its life. "Stay focused," Rick said, his voice calm despite the situation. "We've got this." But Mia wasn't so sure. The ice was unstable, and every second felt like an eternity. The crack in the ice suddenly widened, and Mia felt a wave of terror wash over her. The ground beneath them seemed to shudder as the ice began to give way. "Get back," Rick shouted, pushing Mia and the others away from the widening crack. But it was too late. The ice beneath their feet shattered with a deafening crack, and before Mia could react, she was falling. The icy cold water rushed up to meet her, swallowing her whole. For a moment, everything went black. Mia's body went numb from the shock of the freezing water, and she felt herself being pulled under. Panic surged in her chest as she fought to regain control, her limbs stiff from the cold. Through the chaos she could hear Rick's voice, faint but urgent. "Mia, Mia, hold on." He reached out, grabbing her hand just as she was sinking further into the frigid water. She gasped for air, choking on the icy water, but Rick's grip was firm, pulling her back toward the surface. "You're going to be okay," Rick said, his voice trembling but steady. Mia nodded, her teeth chattering violently as she clung to him. "We can't stop now," she whispered, her voice shaking. The dog was still out there, and they had to save it. Mia gasped as she was pulled back onto the ice, her body shivering uncontrollably from the cold. Rick helped her to her feet, his own body drenched but steady. "We need to get you warm," he said, but Mia shook her head, her eyes fixed on the ice where the dog was still trapped. "We don't have time," she replied, her voice tight with urgency. "The dog is still under there. We can't leave it." Her determination burned through the freezing cold. Rick looked at her, his face a mix of admiration and concern. "We're going to get it out, together." With renewed resolve, the team gathered around, ready to make the final push. The ice was even more unstable now, but they couldn't stop. The dog's cries for help echoed in the silence, and Mia's heart ached with each one. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Let's do this," she said, her voice stronger now. The volunteers moved into position, each one bracing themselves for the final, most dangerous step. They would save the dog, no matter the cost. Mia's hands shook as she gripped the rope, her breath coming in heavy puffs as she fought against the icy cold that had seeped into her bones. She glanced at Rick, who was focused but pale, still recovering from his near-drowning experience. They were all cold, all exhausted, but the task ahead still loomed over them. The dog's desperate movements beneath the ice were growing more frantic. Time was running out. "We're almost there," Mia whispered, more to herself than to the team. Her mind raced with thoughts of the dog, trapped and freezing. "We can't waste another second." The ice creaked beneath them, threatening to give way at any moment. "Stay close," Rick urged, his voice hoarse but calm. One wrong step, and this could end terribly. The team moved cautiously, inching their way toward the crack, the dog's cries for help echoing through the frozen landscape. Every part of Mia's being screamed at her to hurry, but she knew they had to be careful. There was no room for mistakes. As they neared the crack in the ice, Mia felt a surge of determination. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to fail now. The crack in the ice was now only a few feet away. Mia could feel the weight of every step they took. The dog was struggling beneath the surface, its movements growing weaker with each passing moment. Mia could see its eyes, wide with terror, pleading for help. "We're almost there," Rick said, his voice tight. He was exhausted, but there was no time for rest. The sled was still with them, now only a few feet from the crack, the ice groaning beneath their weight. "Just a little more," Mia muttered. Her heart raced as she scanned the ice ahead, calculating their every move. One wrong step could send them all plunging into the freezing water below. "Hold steady," she instructed the others, her voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. "We can't afford to slip." The dog's movements beneath the ice were slowing. Mia's heart sank. It was now or never. "This is it," she said softly. She knew they couldn't waste any more time. They had to act. Without another word, Mia stepped forward, carefully placing one foot after another, the ice cracking and groaning under the pressure. The sled was close now, and the dog's cries grew louder, more frantic. Mia's breath hitched in her throat as she saw it, its small, terrified face just below the surface. She could almost touch it, but she had to be careful. "We're almost there," Mia said, her voice a low whisper. The sled was now close enough to reach, and Rick had already begun to prepare the ropes. "Get ready," he said. Mia nodded, her eyes never leaving the crack in the ice. The team gathered around, positioning themselves carefully as the sled was lowered closer to the ice. Every movement felt like an eternity, the tension mounting with each second. Mia's pulse raced. They were so close. They had to act before the ice completely gave way. "Pull," Rick ordered, his voice steady. The volunteers grabbed the ropes, their hands shaking as they began the slow, careful process of pulling the sled closer to the crack. As they pulled the sled closer to the crack, the ice beneath them creaked again, louder this time. Mia's heart skipped a beat. "Stay calm," Rick said, his voice low and commanding. "We have to stay focused." The team worked together, pulling the sled inch by inch, the sound of the ice cracking louder with each movement. "We're too close now," Mia said, her voice shaky but firm. "We can't stop." The dog's movements grew weaker, its head barely visible beneath the thick ice. Mia's hands were numb, but she didn't care. They had to save it. Tension in the air was almost unbearable as the sled finally reached the edge of the crack. The team stopped, breathless, eyes wide with anticipation. Mia looked down at the ice, knowing they were on the edge of success or failure. She motioned to Rick, and together they carefully positioned the ropes around the sled. On 3, Mia said. 1, 2, 3. The team pulled, their collective strength focused on freeing the trapped animal beneath the ice. The sled was moving now, slowly but surely, and the crack in the ice seemed to grow wider with every inch. Mia's heart raced as they pulled the sled closer to the dog's trapped position. "We're almost there," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. The ice was creaking under the pressure, but the team didn't stop. They couldn't. With one final pull, the sled reached the point where the dog was trapped, and the team gathered around, positioning themselves to break the ice. "Now," Rick said. Mia looked at the dog, her heart aching for the animal that had been trapped for so long. It was so close, but they had to be careful. One wrong move, and they could make everything worse. "On 3, Mia said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. 1, 2, 3. The team pulled with all their might, and the ice finally cracked, a loud shattering sound echoing across the lake. Mia felt a rush of relief, but the work wasn't over. They still had to get the dog out. The tension was far from over, but for the first time, Mia allowed herself to hope. The crack in the ice had finally given way, and the team was breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They had broken through, but the job wasn't done yet. The dog's form was now visible in full, struggling beneath the water. Mia's eyes locked onto the dog, its body shivering violently in the freezing water. She could see its ribs, its eyes pleading, and her heart sank. "We have to get it out now," she said urgently, her voice hoarse from the cold and the intensity of the moment. The volunteers, still on edge, quickly moved into position, each one taking their place to support the effort. Rick stepped forward, his hands trembling but steady. "It's going to take all of us," he said, his voice firm. Mia nodded, her eyes never leaving the dog. They had to act quickly, but the ice was still cracking around them. Every moment felt like a race against time. With the sled now positioned above the break, Mia grabbed the rope, tying it securely. "On 3, she said, her voice gaining strength as the seconds ticked by. 1, 2, 3. The team began pulling, the dog's fate resting in their hands. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she pulled with everything she had, praying they wouldn't be too late. The team pulled with all their strength, their muscles burning with the effort, but the dog was still stuck. Mia's arms ached as she tugged on the rope, but the ice was giving way beneath them. "It's not enough," Rick said through gritted teeth. "We need something more." Mia nodded, her face pale, eyes scanning the surroundings for something. Anything that could help. "We can't stop now," she said, her voice a low whisper of determination. The team was exhausted, but they couldn't let the dog down. "Look over there," Mia pointed. In the distance, a large wooden branch had washed up on the shore after the last storm. "It's heavy enough. We can use it as leverage." Without wasting a moment, the team moved quickly to grab the branch, the cold air stinging their faces as they worked in unison. "We're not giving up," Rick said, his voice thick with resolve. The branch was heavy, but they needed it to break the remaining ice. The team returned, quickly, setting it into place with the ropes. "On 3 again," Mia said, her heart racing but her voice unwavering. 1, 2, 3. This time the ice started to shift. They had one last chance. The branch creaked under the strain, but it was enough. The ice began to shift slowly, and Mia could feel her heart leap in her chest. "It's moving," she cried out, her voice full of hope. But as the ice cracked beneath them, the team held their breath. "Keep pulling," Rick shouted, his voice booming over the sound of the ice breaking. The dog's cries grew louder, and Mia could see its small body shift in the cold water beneath. "Almost there," she whispered, as the ice slowly began to separate, pulling the dog closer to the surface. Each pull brought them one step closer to success. The tension was unbearable, every inch of progress making Mia's heart race faster. She could hear the cracking ice all around them, but they couldn't stop. "We've got to get it out now before the ice completely gives way," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. The team worked in perfect unison, their movements fluid despite the cold and exhaustion. With one final forceful pull, the dog was lifted to the surface. But the ice beneath them groaned louder than ever. It was a race against time now, and they had to act quickly. The dog was almost free, its body now visible above the ice, but Mia's heart stopped when she heard the loudest crack yet. The ice was breaking beneath them, and it was happening fast. "We need to get off the ice, now," Rick shouted, his voice full of panic. Mia glanced around frantically, the team still pulling with everything they had. "Just a little longer," Mia shouted back. The dog's body was now completely visible, and Mia's heart surged with relief. The rescue was so close. But the ice was splintering beneath them, and the air was thick with the sounds of cracking, snapping ice. "Pull, pull harder," Mia yelled. With one final push, the team gave everything they had, and the dog was free. But before Mia could fully react, the ice beneath her cracked, and she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Mia!" Rick shouted, reaching out to grab her. But it was too late. Mia stumbled, and before she knew it, she was plunging into the icy water once again. Panic flooded her system as the cold hit her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, the water freezing her to the core. Her head broke the surface and she gasped for air, but the shock of the cold left her struggling to stay afloat. "Mia?" Rick's voice was distant now, but she could hear him. "I'm here," she managed to shout back, her teeth chattering violently. Mia fought to stay above the freezing water, her limbs numb from the cold. She couldn't see clearly, but she could hear Rick shouting her name, his voice a distant lifeline. "Hold on," he cried out, his voice full of urgency. Mia's mind raced as she tried to stay afloat, but the shock of the cold made everything feel like it was slipping away. She could barely feel her arms as they moved through the icy water. "I'm here," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the sound of the breaking ice. Rick's figure appeared at the edge of the ice, his hand reaching down toward her. "Grab on," he shouted. Mia's body was too numb to respond quickly, but with all her remaining strength, she reached up and grabbed Rick's hand. He pulled hard, dragging her toward the ice's edge. The team was still there, watching in horror, but they didn't hesitate. They moved forward, their hands reaching out to help Mia, pulling her back to safety. She collapsed onto the ice, shivering uncontrollably, but alive. The dog, now safely free, was on the ice beside them, its body trembling but no longer trapped. The rescue had been successful, but the cost had been high. Mia felt the weight of the moment, her body exhausted, but relief washed over her. "We did it," she whispered, barely able to speak. Rick nodded, his own exhaustion written all over his face. "We did." Mia lay on the cold, fractured ice, her body trembling uncontrollably, but she was alive. She could hear the frantic voices of her team around her, but everything felt distant, muffled. The rush of blood in her ears drowned out the chaos, and for a moment, all she could do was focus on the simple act of breathing. Rick knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, checking her vitals. "You're okay," he said softly, his voice calm but full of concern. But Mia's mind was still spinning. They had just rescued the dog, but at what cost? Her limbs felt heavy, numb from the cold and shock. Her thoughts drifted to the dog, still shivering by her side. It had been through the same ordeal, but it was safe now. That realization brought her some comfort. "We did it," Mia whispered, her voice weak. Rick nodded, but there was no celebration in his eyes. They had faced the impossible, but the road ahead was still uncertain. "We're not out of danger yet," Rick said, helping her sit up. "The dog needs immediate warmth and care." Mia nodded, her thoughts sharp and clear now. The rescue wasn't over. It had only just begun. The team worked quickly, pulling Mia to safety and wrapping her in thick blankets. Rick stayed close, his gaze never leaving her. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice gentle but worried. Mia struggled to sit up, the warmth of the blankets comforting, but not enough to erase the deep chill that still lingered in her bones. "I'm okay," she replied, her voice shaky but determined. "I just need a moment." The dog, now resting beside her, was wrapped in a thermal blanket, its body still trembling but no longer at risk of hypothermia. Mia watched the dog's slow, steady breathing and felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had done it. They had done it. But Rick was right. This wasn't the end. "We can't stay out here much longer," Mia said, looking around at the desolate landscape. "The ice is still cracking, and we need to get back to town." The volunteers moved into action, securing the sled and preparing to carry the dog and Mia to safety. They had made it through the worst, but now the challenge was getting back. As the sled was prepared, Maya's body finally began to thaw, though every movement still sent shocks of pain through her muscles. The cold had numbed her, but now that she was safe, the ache of her exhaustion hit her all at once. Rick helped her to her feet, his hand steady on her back. "Can you walk?" he asked, concern still evident in his voice. Mia nodded, though she felt unsteady on her feet. "I'll manage," she said, her voice firm despite the weakness in her legs. She could see the determination in Rick's eyes as he scanned the area, making sure they were all ready to leave. The dog was now in a secured spot on the sled, and it looked like it would survive. But Mia's gaze was fixed on the ice beneath them. The cold was still there, threatening, as if the lake itself was holding them hostage. "Let's go," Rick said, his voice steady as he motioned to the team. "We need to get out of here before it's too late." Mia nodded again, forcing her body to move forward. They had made it through the worst, but they weren't home yet. As they moved away from the lake, Mia felt the weight of the situation sinking in. The adrenaline from the rescue was wearing off, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. Rick stayed close to her, his presence steady. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. Mia didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure what to say. The gravity of everything they'd just been through hadn't fully hit her yet. The rescue had been a success, but it had come at such a high cost. "It's not over yet," Mia replied softly, her voice strained. "We still have to get back, still have to make sure the dog is okay." Rick gave her a reassuring look. "We'll get there," he said with confidence. The volunteers continued their careful trek across the ice, the sled now heavier with the dog and the weight of the moment. Mia's eyes wandered back to the lake, now receding in the distance. She couldn't help but feel a deep sense of accomplishment, but it was tinged with sadness. This wasn't just about rescuing an animal. It was about pushing past fear, facing the unknown, and surviving. The team had done that, but the journey was far from over. Mia collapsed onto the snow, trembling from the cold and exhaustion. The team gathered around, offering warmth, but her mind was still on the dog, safe but shaken. "We made it," Mia whispered, her voice hoarse. Rick knelt beside her, handing her warm water. "You saved the dog, Mia." She met his gaze, and smiled, faintly. "We all did," she replied, her voice stronger. The journey had been harrowing, but together they had succeeded. Mia sat by the window, staring at the endless snow, her hands trembling around a mug of tea. Despite the warmth of the cabin, the memories of the rescue still haunted her. The ice, the dog's desperate cries, it all felt too close. Rick watched her quietly. "You okay?" he asked. Mia nodded, her voice shaky. "Yeah, just processing." The dog was safe now, but the emotional toll lingered. She wasn't sure how to move forward yet, but she knew she couldn't stay in the past forever. Rick walked over and sat beside Mia. "You did something amazing," he said, his voice calm but heavy with gratitude. Mia smiled faintly, still gazing out the window. "We all did." She paused. "I don't think I've processed it all yet." She hadn't realized how much the fear, the rush, had affected her until now, in the quiet after. Rick placed a hand on her shoulder. "It'll take time." Mia nodded. "I know." She just needed to heal, to find peace in the aftermath of the chaos. I'm just glad it's over, she whispered. The next day, Mia went outside to check on the dog. Wrapped in blankets and resting by the porch, it had improved greatly. The vet had confirmed the worst was over. Mia crouched beside it, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. You're going to be okay, she whispered softly. The dog looked up at her with tired eyes, its body still trembling but the fear gone. As Mia stroked its fur, a deep peace settled over her. She had done what seemed impossible, and now both she and the dog were safe. But part of her would always carry the weight of what they'd faced. Mia stood up, looking out over the snow-covered fields. She felt the exhaustion in her bones, but also a quiet pride in her heart. I never thought I'd be capable of something like this, she said softly, to no one in particular. Rick, standing beside her, gave her a small smile. You did more than you realize. Mia turned to him, grateful for his support. She had learned something about herself in those harrowing hours, about resilience, strength, and the importance of never giving up. We all did, she said. We worked together. That's what saved us. Rick nodded. And we'll keep going, together. As evening fell, Mia and Rick sat by the fire again, the dog resting peacefully by the door. The weight of the past days still lingered, but Mia felt a new sense of calm. I think it's finally sinking in, she said. We really did it. Rick smiled, his eyes full of respect. You did it. Mia shook her head, smiling softly. We all did. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the world was quiet, the storm passed. Inside, Mia felt a sense of closure, knowing that the struggle was over, and that she had faced it with strength, courage, and the help of those who had stood beside her. Mia stood outside the cabin, the sun barely rising over the snow-covered landscape. The air was crisp, but the world felt peaceful, calm. The past few days had changed her, deepened her sense of resilience. She hadn't known she had it in her. The icy lake, the dog trapped beneath it, all of it seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the memories lingered, haunting her thoughts. Rick stepped beside her, offering her a warm mug of coffee. You okay? He asked. She smiled faintly, her eyes distant. Yeah, just thinking about everything. It had been a journey she never expected to take, yet one that had shaped her in ways she never imagined. The dog was healing, the team was safe, and the lake was behind them. But Mia knew she wouldn't forget the lessons learned, the strength discovered. We made it, she said quietly, looking out at the horizon. We really did. As the team packed up to leave the cabin, Mia felt a weight lift from her chest. The storm had passed, both literally and figuratively. The dog was on its way to recovery, and the journey home would be smoother. You did well out there, Rick said, breaking the silence. Mia glanced at him, grateful for his support. I don't know how I would have done it without you, she replied. The team had worked together, each of them playing a part. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, unity could bring them through. As they loaded the sled, Mia felt a surge of gratitude for the people who had stood by her. They were more than just a team, they were family. Let's go home, Mia said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. And with that, the group made their way back to town, leaving the wilderness behind. The path back to town felt longer than it had on the way in, but this time, Mia was not focused on the dangers ahead. She was focused on what they had overcome. The dog was now wagging its tail, no longer trembling, and Mia couldn't help but feel proud of what they had achieved. You did it, Rick said, his voice a mix of pride and admiration. Mia smiled, looking at the dog. We all did, she replied, knowing that each person had contributed to the rescue in their own way. Despite the exhaustion, there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. They had faced the impossible, but together, they had triumphed. The wilderness felt less intimidating now, the harsh elements now behind them. As they neared the town, the familiar sights felt comforting. The snow-covered buildings and the rising smoke from chimneys reminded Mia of the simpler things in life. The team had faced down the wilderness, and now they were heading home. I never thought I'd get to feel this kind of peace, Mia said quietly. Rick nodded in agreement. It changes you, he said, his tone thoughtful. Mia glanced at the dog, now curled up contentedly in the sled. Yeah, it really does. The tension from the past few days had melted away, replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. It had been a struggle, but it was a struggle worth fighting. Let's make sure we get the dog the care it needs, Mia added, a quiet sense of responsibility still in her voice. She was no longer just a rescuer. She was a protector, and she would continue to do what she could to ensure the safety of those who needed her. Mia stood at the edge of town, watching as the others unloaded the sleds. She felt a sense of peace settle within her, but there was also a lingering thought. They had saved a life, but the experience had changed her. You're a hero, Rick said, his voice kind but joking. Mia laughed softly, shaking her head. No, we're all heroes here. She thought of the team, of the sacrifices made, the strength they had found together. I couldn't have done it without you all, she added. Rick smiled, clapping her on the back. We did it together. Mia looked out over the town, a soft smile on her face. We sure did.